The silence on the bridge of the Nomad was a living thing, a pressure against the ears that the low hum of life support could not disguise. It was the silence of deep space, vast and uncaring, a silence that had swallowed civilizations. For Alara Vance, it was the sound of failure. She stood before the main observation window, a pane of reinforced crystal that looked out onto the endless black. But her eyes saw a different scene, projected on the glass. Visible only to her was the memory she replayed every cycle, her private sermon and her personal hell. It was the Gardens of Haven, a world that no longer existed, its skies a brilliant, cloudless azure. Her husband, Liam, was laughing, his head thrown back as their daughter, 7-year-old Maya, chased a flutter-winged drone through a field of alien flowers. The memory was sharp, painfully so. A perfect digital ghost captured an hour before the Athelian ascendancy arrived to prune the blighted branch of humanity. Ilara had been there, the chief negotiator in a last desperate attempt at peace, the Athelian envoy, a being of smooth, white stone and flowing energy named the Proctor, had not even raised its voice. "Your species is a discordant note in the grand silence." It had chimed, its voice like glass striking glass. "Your emotions, your chaotic expansion, it is a sickness. The universe requires harmony. We are the cure." As it spoke, the first kinetic lances struck from orbit, silent and precise. They didn't burn Haven. They shattered it, cracking the planet's mantle with surgical coldness. There was no fire, no chaos, just a world breaking apart in the quiet vacuum, the garden. Liam, Maya, they were all atomized in the first wave. The memory faded, leaving Ilara alone with her reflection in the viewport, a woman whose dark hair was threaded with premature gray, whose face was a mask of cold control, and whose eyes held the flat, dead light of a dying star. This was the price of diplomacy. This was the result of seeking compromise with a force that saw your very existence as a cosmic error. She had sworn an oath that day, not to a flag or a government, for Earth had fallen decades ago, and the scattered remnants of humanity were too busy squabbling to be a nation, but to the memory of that silent, shattering sky. She would never again seek peace. She would give the Athelians the discord they so despised. A soft chime pulled her from her reverie. "Director Vance," a voice said, calm and steady. It was Anya, her tactical officer, a woman barely out of her 20s whose idealism was a constant, baffling irritant. "The council is ready for your report." Ilara turned, the starfield wheeling behind her. The bridge of the Nomad was not the command deck of a warship. It was the repurposed heart of a century-old deep space hauler, a behemoth designed to move asteroid ore. Now, its guts were filled with salvaged military hardware, its cargo bays lined with torpedo tubes, its hull plated with scavenged armor. It was a Q-ship, a lie wrapped in steel, a predator masquerading as prey. And it was the perfect reflection of Ilara's new philosophy of war. She walked to the central holo table, the faces of the Kepler Remnant's leadership flickering into view. They were a collection of the desperate and the powerful miners turned warlords, disgraced corporate executives, and one grizzled, imposing figure at the center, General Corbin. His face, a roadmap of scars from battles long lost, was set in a permanent scowl. "Director," Corbin began, his voice a low gravel. "Your long-range patrol has returned. Report." Ilara's gaze swept over the assembled faces. They were afraid, all of them. For 5 years, they had fought a shadow war in this forgotten cluster of stars, hiding, running, surviving. The Ethelians were patient, methodical. They would find them eventually. Waiting was just choosing the date of your own execution. "We found something," Ilara said, her voice cutting through the tension. "A signal, faint, heavily degraded, on a secure channel that hasn't been used since the fall." She gestured to Anya, who brought up a star chart. A single point of light pulsed deep within a crimson smear of space, marked ascendancy controlled. "The signal originates from the Veritas system." A murmur rippled through the council members. Veritas was a myth, a ghost story, a scientific outpost that had gone dark in the first days of the war, presumed to be one of the first worlds cleansed. "They're alive," Ilara continued, letting the weight of the words settle. "And they claim to have found a weakness. Not in their ships, not in their weapons, in their travel. They've found a way to disrupt, even predict, their fold space transitions." The silence that followed was heavier than before. The Ethelians' greatest advantage was their mastery of fold space. Their fleets could appear and disappear at will, striking without warning. Their movements a mystery. To counter that would be to change the entire nature of the war. It was Corbin who broke the silence, his voice laced with suspicion. "It's a trap. A lure to draw out our last remaining capital ships." Another council member, a former CEO named Sullins, nodded vigorously. "He's right. It's a fool's errand. We need to consolidate our defenses, protect what we have left. We can't afford to chase ghosts." Ilara held their gazes. One by one, she saw the same fear she'd seen on the faces of the negotiators on Haven, the willingness to concede, to shrink, to hope that the monster would eat you last. "Protect what we have left," she countered, her voice dangerously soft. "We have nothing left. We have this cluster of rocks and a handful of ships running on salvaged parts and desperation. The Ethelians aren't attacking us head-on because they don't need to. They are constricting, slowly strangling us. They've cut off 3 trade routes in the last year. Our resource stockpiles are critical. Waiting here isn't a strategy. It's a slow-motion suicide. This," she pointed to the blinking light of Veritas, "is a chance. It is likely the last one we will ever get. A chance to stop hiding and remind them that we are not just a discordant note. We are a goddamn war drum." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a condemnation. She saw a flicker of something in their eyes, the memory of pride, the ghost of defiance. She pressed her advantage, turning her gaze on Corbin. "General, you preach defense, but there is no wall high enough to keep them out. The only true defense is to take away their ability to strike at will. You know I'm right." Corbin stared at the map, his jaw tight. He despised Ilara's methods, her cold pragmatism, her willingness to sacrifice pieces on the board for a long-shot victory. But he was a soldier, and he understood the grim arithmetic of their situation. "One ship," he said finally, looking up at her, his eyes like chips of granite. "You get the Nomad and 2 corvettes. No more. The rest of the fleet stays to defend the remnant. And Ilara," he leaned closer to the hollow emitter, "if this is a trap, and you lead them back here, I will fire on your ship myself. Is that understood?" Ilara offered a thin, mirthless smile. "Perfectly, General. If I fail, you won't have to." The mission was codenamed Operation Chimera, as the Nomad and its two escorts, the Swift and the Resolve, prepared to depart. The tension on the bridge was a palpable force. The crew moved with a grim purpose, their faces strained. No one believed this was anything but a one-way trip. Ilara stood with her chief fold drive engineer, Kalen, a man whose genius was matched only by his profound cynicism. He'd watched his home system of Proxima C be harmonized by the Athelians, and the experience had burned all hope out of him. A blind jump into their territory based on a 20-year-old ghost signal, he muttered, running a diagnostic on the drive core. The fold drive was a massive, chaotic apparatus of spinning rings and arcing energy, less a machine and more a caged god that bent space-time against its will. This isn't a plan, Director. It's a prayer. Then you'd better hope it's answered. Kalen, Ilara replied without looking at him. Your theories on asynchronous fold tunneling, this is your chance to test them. Get us there, he grunted, turning back to his console. The theories are sound. The hardware is a pile of junk held together with spit and rust. The drive might get us there, or it might turn us into a smear of quarks across 4 dimensions. 50-50. At the tactical station, Anya watched the escort ships move into formation, their running lights like loyal stars in the darkness. She looked over at Ilara, her expression a mixture of awe and fear. All ships report ready for fold sequence. Director. Ilara took her place in the command chair, the worn leather cool against her back. Her gaze was fixed on the viewport, on the distant, cold stars of Athelian space. Begin sequence, she said, her voice betraying no emotion. Take us in. Kalen engaged the drive. The universe outside the viewport began to twist, the stars stretching into long, thin lines of light, pulling and contorting as the ship tore a hole in reality. A tunnel of swirling, impossible colors formed around them, the strange, disorienting non-space of the fold. For a moment, there was a sense of breathtaking speed, of infinite travel in an instant. Then, alarms blared across the bridge, a cacophony of shrieking alerts. What is it? Ilara demanded, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. Anya's face was pale. I don't know, something's in the fold with us multiple contacts that's impossible. On the main screen, the swirling colors of the fold were disrupted by patches of absolute black, voids that were not just empty, but were actively erasing the space around them. One of the voids drifted toward the icon representing the Resolve. The icon simply vanished. No explosion, no distress call. It was just gone. They're collapsing the fold around us, Kalen yelled over the alarms, his hands flying across his console. They're not just attacking us. They're unwriting reality. We have to drop out now. We can't. Anya countered. We'll emerge in the middle of their patrol routes. A second void erased the Swift. They were alone. The blackness was closing in, a creeping edge of nothing that was now converging on the Nomad. Kalen, Ilara's voice was sharp as ice. Get us out of here. I don't care how. Kalen's face was slick with sweat, his eyes wide with a terrifying, manic energy. There's one way, he shouted, his fingers a blur. A blind jump, no calculations, no exit vector. I'm going to overload the core and punch a hole through the wall of the tunnel. Do it, Ilara commanded. The ship shuddered violently, a deep groan echoing up from the engineering deck as the fold drive screamed under the strain. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into emergency reds. On the screen, The tunnel of light dissolved into a blinding, white glare. The feeling was not of movement, but of being torn apart and reassembled simultaneously. Then, with a final, bone-jarring lurch, the motion stopped. The emergency lights stabilized, casting long, bloody shadows across the bridge. The alarms fell silent, replaced once more by the low hum of the life support. Anya stumbled to the viewport, her eyes wide. "Status?" Ilara asked, her voice tight. Kalen slumped back in his chair, breathing heavily. "We're out. We're in real space. Outside the window, there was no familiar star chart, no recognizable constellation. They were adrift in a sea of incandescent gas, a swirling of majestic nebula of violet and gold that bathed the bridge in its ethereal light. It was beautiful, alien, and utterly unknown. Anya's hands trembled as she brought up the navigation charts. They were blank. "Director," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know where we are. The star charts. There's nothing. We're not on any map." Ilara rose from her chair and walked to the viewport, staring out at the uncharted cosmos. Operation Chimera was a catastrophic failure. One jump, and they had lost both escorts and were stranded light years off course in hostile territory. Their ship damaged. Their location a mystery. She had forced this mission, overriding caution with her own desperate certainty. She had gambled with the last hope of the remnant and lost. The weight of 2 crews, of their entire future, settled upon her shoulders, heavier than any star. The nebula's light played across her face, illuminating not a leader or a strategist, but a woman utterly and completely alone in the dark. The next few hours were a controlled descent into chaos. Damage reports flooded the bridge, a litany of catastrophic failures and near misses. The emergency fold jump had saved them from annihilation, but had brutalized the Nomad. The main drive core was offline, bleeding radiation into the aft engineering decks. Hull integrity was a patchwork of active force fields and emergency bulkheads. Life support was stable, but only because non-essential systems across the ship had been sacrificed to power it. Worst of all were the casualty reports. 47 crew members, primarily from the engineering sections nearest the drive core, were dead. Another 30 were severely injured. The 2 escort ships, the Swift and the Resolve, were simply gone. Their 150 crew members erased from existence in a way that left no debris, no wreckage, only a void in the roster. Ilara stood amidst the quiet devastation of the bridge, listening to the reports with an unnerving calm. Each name, each system failure, was a stone she added to the cairn she was building in her soul. This was her fault, her certainty. Her refusal to heed Corbin's caution had led them here. But guilt was a luxury, a self-indulgence she could not afford. It was a fire that could either consume you or be used to forge something harder in its heat. She chose the latter. "Anya," she said, her voice cutting through the hushed tones of the damage control teams. "Organize medical triage in the main cargo bay. Get every able-bodied crew member on repair duty. I want a full diagnostic on the fold drive within the hour." "Kalen," she turned to the engineer, who was staring at his console, his face a mask of horrified fascination. "What did they do to us in there?" Kalen looked up, his eyes seeming to focus from a great distance. "It wasn't a weapon," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Not in the way we think of them. It was a negation. They didn't fire a missile. They targeted the specific quantum frequency of our fold tunnel and introduced a null state paradox. They turned the very fabric of our transit into a self-consuming anomaly. It's like they reached into the water and made the water itself eat our ships. It's impossible. It's God-level physics. Alara processed this, the implications chilling her more than any plasma torpedo ever could. Can they do it again? She asked. Can they track us? Kalen shook his head, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I don't know. The energy signature was localized. Maybe they can only do it along their established fold routes, like setting a mine. Our emergency jump was a random vector. We tore through the wall of the fold. It's possible, just possible, that we're somewhere they can't easily follow. This sliver of hope was all they had. An hour later, the senior staff gathered at the holotable. The mood was funereal. Anya, her face pale and drawn, gave the status report. The drive is crippled. Director, Kalen thinks he can get it back online, but it will take at least 3 days of continuous work. And even then, he says another fold jump is a terrible idea. We're running on emergency power. Morale is critical. The crew saw what happened to the escorts. They're terrified. They feel like we're adrift in our own coffin. She paused, then looked directly at Ilara, her voice dropping but firm. They need to know there's a plan to get home. Ilara's gaze was hard. There is no home to get back to. Lieutenant, not until the Athelians are dealt with. Our mission hasn't changed. Anya stared back, incredulous. Director, the mission is a catastrophic failure. We are stranded, damaged, and alone. We have to prioritize survival. We need to find a star to get a navigational fix and plot a course back to the remnant, however long it takes. Running back with our tails between our legs is not survival, Ilara countered, her voice dangerously low. It's a death sentence on an installment plan. The Athelians have a weapon that can erase ships in fold space. If we don't understand it, if we don't find a way to counter it, then the remnant is already lost. They just don't know it yet. Veritas is still our only hope of finding that counter. We don't even know if we can find the signal from here, Anya argued, her voice rising with a passion born of fear for her crewmates. We are lost. Then we get unlost, Ilara snapped. She turned to the blank star chart. The nebula. It's not on any of our charts, but it's not random noise. It's a stellar nursery, full of protostars and dense gas clouds. And it's masking us. Our energy signature is a whisper in a hurricane out here. While Kalen repairs the drive, we use our long-range sensors to map this place. We find the Veritas signal, and we finish what we started. Anya looked as if she'd been slapped, stunned into silence by Ilara's sheer, unyielding will. Kalen just sighed, a sound of profound weariness. Mapping a nebula of this size with our power levels will take weeks, he said. Weeks we might not have, Ilara acknowledged. So we'd better get started. For 2 days, the Nomad drifted through the silent, swirling clouds of purple and gold. The crew worked with the grim, silent efficiency of the damned. They patched hull breaches, rerouted power conduits, and tended to the wounded. And on the bridge, Ilara and her team scanned, probed, and mapped the celestial sea they were lost in. The Veritas signal remained elusive, a ghost in the static. On the 3rd day, a sensor alert chimed through the bridge, the first sign of anything other than gas and radiation since their arrival. Contact, Anya called out, her voice sharp with alarm. Multiple contacts, dead ahead. They're not moving. No active power signatures. Ilara moved to the tactical display. Clustered in a pocket of clear space at the nebula's heart was a debris field, but it was unlike any she had ever seen. The main viewer resolved the image. It was a graveyard. Dozens of ships, perhaps hundreds, lay silent and dead. They were of all shapes and designs, none of them human. Some were sleek, organic-looking vessels that seemed grown rather than built. Others were brutalist blocks of crystalline material, and among them, scattered like broken statues, were the unmistakable forms of Athelian cruisers. They were shattered, torn open not by weapon impacts, but as if they had been ripped apart by immense gravitational forces. Something in this nebula was a predator, and it did not discriminate. "Scan the wreckage," Ilara ordered, her mind racing. "Look for a common cause." What did this to them? Kalen, drawn to the bridge by the alert, was already analyzing the energy readings. "It's odd," he murmured, his usual cynicism replaced by academic curiosity. "There are faint gravimetric distortions all over the wreckage, and a residual energy signature I've never seen before. It's ancient. The decay rate suggests these ships have been here for thousands of years, some of them longer." While the crew scanned the ghost fleet, Anya's sensor station chirped again. "Director, I'm picking up a source for the energy Kalen mentioned. It's faint, but it's coming from the center of the graveyard, a single, larger object." Ilara magnified the view. At the very heart of the silent battlefield, almost perfectly camouflaged against the darkness, was a structure. It was not a ship. It was a latticework of interlocking rings and spheres made of a material so black it seemed to drink the nebula's light. It was vast, easily the size of a small moon, and it was utterly alien. It looked like a gigantic, mechanical model of an unknown solar system, an orrery built by gods. "It's the source of the distortions," Kalen said, his voice filled with a reverence Ilara had never heard from him. "It's not active, but it's not completely dead either. It's resonating with the nebula itself. It's a work of art. It's also the only thing in the system that might have answers," Ilara said, her decision already made. "Anya, get me a damage report on our external systems. Kalen, I need to know if we can get a shuttle close to that thing without being torn apart by the same forces that destroyed those ships." A new plan was forming in her mind, one born not of desperation, but of a cold, calculating curiosity. Veritas might have been a lure, a trap. But this place, this cosmic graveyard and its silent, magnificent centerpiece, was not. It was a secret. And the Athelians, for all their power, had clearly not been able to unlock it. Perhaps humanity, in its chaos and discord, could. 24 hours later, a heavily modified maintenance shuttle, the Wren, detached from the Nomad's belly. It was a small, ugly craft, but its hull had been reinforced, and its sensor suite was a jury-rigged marvel of Kalen's design. Ilara was in the pilot's seat. Beside her was Kalen, who refused to miss the chance to see the alien structure up close. In the back, a small security team of 4 sat in grim silence. As they approached the orrery, its scale became truly mind-boggling. The rings, miles in diameter, rotated in slow, unsynchronized orbits around a central, unlit sphere. The entire structure hummed with a low, sub-audible frequency that vibrated through the shuttle's hull, a deep, ancient thrum that felt like the universe breathing. The gravimetric fields are chaotic but predictable, Kalen said, his eyes glued to his console. It's like navigating through a storm of invisible whirlpools. Whoever built this understood gravitational physics in a way we can barely comprehend. Ilara expertly guided the wren through the swirling energies, her focus absolute. They passed close to one of the derelict Athelian ships. Its stone-like hull was peeled open like a fruit, the internal corridors exposed to the vacuum. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, just an empty, broken vessel. They found a stable docking point on one of the larger, non-rotating rings, a section that appeared to be a maintenance or observation platform. The shuttle's clamps magnetized to the strange, black metal with a solid thud. Donning sealed environment suits, the small team stepped out onto the surface of the alien artifact. The silence was absolute. The light from the nebula cast their long, distorted shadows across the platform. Before them was a massive doorway, sealed, but with seams that glowed with a faint, internal light. No obvious way to open it, the security team leader reported. Kalen was already scanning it. "It's not a door," he said, tapping commands into his wrist-mounted computer. "It's a membrane. It responds to specific energy frequencies, like a lock that needs a key made of sound." He paused, then looked at Ilara. "We're broadcasting a standard human hailing frequency. On a hunch, I'm going to try broadcasting the Athelian energy signature I recorded from the Fold space attack." He configured his device, and a low and dissonant chime echoed in their helmets, the sound of the Athelians harmonizing energy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the seams on the door glowed brighter. The black surface shimmered and became translucent, resolving into a shimmering portal. "Well, I'll be damned," Kalen breathed. "It knows them." Ilara drew her sidearm, her face set. "Let's see what they were so afraid of." They stepped through the portal. The interior was not a corridor or a room, but an infinite space. They were standing on a walkway of light, suspended in a perfect blackness. And all around them, floating in the void, were shimmering, silver threads. Thousands of them. Millions. They pulsed with a soft light, weaving and intersecting, forming a complex tapestry that stretched into infinity. "My God!" Anya's voice crackled over the comm from the Nomad. "We're seeing it on your suit feeds." "What is it?" "It's a map," Kalen whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "This entire place, it's a real-time map of every Fold space transition in the galaxy. Each thread is a ship in the Fold." He pointed to a bright, discordant cluster of threads pulsing with the same disharmonious energy as the Athelian weapon. "That's them. The Athelian fleet. This is how they move. It's not just technology, it's a song they sing to space-time." As they watched, a single fainter thread flickered into existence far from the Athelian cluster. It was weak, fragile, but it was there. The Veritas signal. Ilara breathed. It was real. The scientists had found a way to create their own Fold tunnel, their own thread in the tapestry. But then, as her eyes followed the Athelian threads, she saw something else, moving between the silver strands. Like sharks gliding through a school of fish were shapes. They were not threads of light, but patches of absolute, predatory darkness, the same voids that had taken her escorts. They were hunting. The orrery was not just a map of the paths, it was a map of the hunting grounds. And the Ethelian weapon wasn't their own creation. It was a captured predator, a caged beast they had learned to unleash on their enemies. Before they could process the horrifying revelation, the central sphere of the orrery began to glow. A new light, deep and crimson, pulsed from its core. The silver threads began to vibrate violently, and the dark shapes in the void turned, their unseen attention focusing not on the Ethelians, but on the new, unfamiliar presence that had just stepped onto their map. "Elara," Kalen said, his voice tight with sudden, primal fear. "I think we just rang the dinner bell." The crimson light pulsing from the orrery's core was not just a visual phenomenon. It was a physical force. A low, resonant hum filled their helmets, a thrumming that vibrated deep in their bones, primal and menacing. In the infinite space around them, the silver threads representing ships in fold space began to writhe as if in agony. The dark, predatory voids, the hunters stopped their slow, patient patrol of the Ethelian fleet and began to drift, with a terrifying, deliberate speed, toward the single, fragile thread representing the Veritas signal. "They're going after them." Anya's voice crackled from the Nomad, laced with panic. The signal just spiked with a massive energy surge. "It looks like a distress call, Director. Whatever you did, you painted a target on them." Elara watched, her mind a maelstrom of horror and calculation. The scientists on Veritas hadn't just found a weakness in Ethelian travel. They had blundered into a cosmic food chain. The Ethelians didn't own fold space. They were merely the most successful poachers in a jungle teeming with invisible apex predators. And by activating the orrery, Elara had alerted those predators to a new, wounded animal. "Kalen, can we shut it down?" she demanded, turning to the engineer. Sever our connection." Kalen was frantically working on his wrist-mounted device, his face a grimace of concentration. "I don't think it works that way. We didn't turn it on. We just woke it up. It's an observation deck, not a control room. It's showing us what's already happening." He was right. The orrery wasn't a weapon. It was a sensory organ for a system far beyond their comprehension. They were inside a cosmic eye that had just blinked open. The security team leader, a hardened veteran named Riker, moved to Elara's side. "Ma'am, we need to fall back to the shuttle. Now. I don't know what this place is, but we've overstayed our welcome." Elara's gaze was fixed on the map. She saw the dark shapes converging on the Veritas thread. She saw the distant, chaotic cluster of Ethelian threads, some of which were now altering their vectors, moving to intercept whatever was happening. The Ethelians were reacting. They were afraid of this place, of these hunters, and in their fear, she saw an opportunity, a terrible, desperate gambit. "No," she said, her voice a low command that silenced the rising panic. "We're not running. Riker, secure the entrance. Kalen, I need to know everything you can figure out about this map. What are the rules? How do the hunters find their prey? What makes one thread a target and another invisible?" Kalen stared at her, his expression a mixture of terror and disbelief. "You want to study the monsters while they're coming to eat us? Are you insane? The Ethelians have been using these things as weapons." Elara shot back, her voice sharp as shrapnel. "That means they understand something about them. They can aim them. They see a pattern. I need that pattern. Now." Her authority was absolute, a gravity well of sheer will that pulled them all back from the edge. Riker nodded grimly and directed his team to set up a defensive perimeter near the shimmering portal. their pulse rifles looking like pathetic toys in the vast alien chamber. Kalen, muttering curses about madwomen and suicide missions, turned back to the map, his scientific curiosity overriding his instinct for self-preservation. "It's about resonance," he said after a few frantic moments of analysis, pointing a trembling finger at the display. "Look, the ethelian threads. They're not a single uniform color. They have a subtle, complex frequency, like a chord in music. But the Veritas thread is a monotone. It's loud, simple, and has no modulation. It's like someone screaming in a library. The hunters aren't seeing it. They're hearing its simplicity." He then pointed to the dark shapes. "And them. They don't hunt by moving through the tapestry. They move between the threads. They're extra-dimensional. They warp the space around a fold tunnel until it collapses on itself. It's a quantum decapitation." As he spoke, the Veritas thread on the map flared brilliantly for a single, final moment, and then vanished. Anya's voice came over the comm, choked with emotion. "Signal lost. The Veritas frequency. It's gone. Director, they're gone." Ilara closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Another hope extinguished. Another group of humans silenced by the vast, uncaring cosmos. But this time, she had seen the axe fall. She understood the shape of the blade. "They left an echo," Kalen said suddenly, his voice hushed. "The collapse. It left a residual gravimetric signature, a scar." He looked up at Ilara, his eyes wide with a terrifying understanding. "It's the same signature we saw on the derelict ships in the graveyard. This is what happened to them all. They blundered in here, made a simple, loud noise, and the caretakers of this place cleaned them up." A cold certainty settled in Ilara's mind. "The Ethelian's cord," she said. "It's their camouflage, a complex frequency that mimics the background noise of the universe. It's how they hide from the hunters. That's their secret. Not a weapon, but a disguise." She looked at the roiling cluster of Ethelian threads. "And we're going to steal it." "Steal it," Riker interrupted, his voice incredulous. "Ma'am, we can barely stand here without getting our atoms scrambled. How are we going to steal a sound from a species that thinks in music and glass?" "With a tuning fork," Ilara replied, turning to Kalen. "Your drive. You said it was a caged god that bends space-time. I want you to turn it into a microphone. Can you reconfigure its energy resonance to match the Ethelian frequency?" Kalen's mouth opened and closed silently for a moment. The sheer audacity of the idea was staggering. He was being asked to perform interstellar espionage on a quantum level. "Theoretically, maybe," he stammered. "If I had direct access to the ship's core systems and a live feed of the Ethelian frequency from here, I could try to create a sympathetic resonance loop. It would mean routing all remaining power to the drive core. The ship would be completely vulnerable while I did it. And if I get it wrong, the resulting feedback would either vaporize the Nomad or turn the full drive into a black hole." "What are the odds?" Ilara asked, her expression unreadable. Kalen gave a short, barking laugh devoid of humor. "Less than 50-50 this time. Far less. This is like trying to forge a key by listening to the sound of the lock turning from a mile away." Ilara met his gaze. "Then you'd better have a good ear. Get back to the shuttle. Riker and I will hold this position and feed you the data." Before anyone could argue, the crimson light from the central sphere pulsed again, more intensely this time. On the map, one of the dark, hunting shapes detached from the area where Veritas had vanished and began to move, slowly but inexorably, toward their location. It had heard them. The dinner bell had been answered. "Go," Elara commanded. Kalen and two of Riker's team sprinted back toward the portal. "Anya." Elara's voice was calm, broadcasting to the ship. "Prepare to slave the main drive to Kalen's terminal as soon as he's aboard the Wren. Divert all power, including life support from non-essential decks. I want that core humming and ready." "Acknowledged, Director," Anya replied, her voice strained but steady. The fear was gone, replaced by the sharp focus of a soldier following her orders, however insane they might be. Elara and Riker took up positions near the walkway, facing the infinite blackness. They couldn't see the hunter, but they could feel it. The sub-audible hum of the orrery was rising in pitch, a low growl that resonated in their chests. The very air around them felt like it was growing heavy, compressed by an unseen force. "You really think this is going to work?" Riker asked, his rifle sight scanning the empty space before them. "I think," Elara said, checking the charge on her own sidearm. "That sitting still and waiting to be harmonized by the Athelians is a guaranteed death. I think running home is a slower death. This is at least a choice. A chance to die fighting something that even our enemies are afraid of." A flicker of a grim smile crossed Riker's lips. "Can't argue with that logic, ma'am." Over the comm, Kalen's voice returned, breathless. "I'm in the shuttle. Anya, I have control of the drive core. The power drain is astronomical. The ship's lights are going to be flickering like a candle in a hurricane." A few moments later, on the map display projected inside Alara's helmet, a new thread appeared. It was faint, wavering, and monotone, a single, simple note, just like the Veritas signal. It was the energy signature of the Wren's power core, a beacon in the darkness. Immediately, the hunter in the void accelerated, closing the distance. "It's working," Kalen shouted, a note of hysteria in his voice. "It sees the shuttle now. I'm feeding the Athelian frequency into the resonance dampeners, trying to match the chord. This is like tuning a piano during an earthquake." The thread representing the shuttle began to flicker and change. The single note wavered, then fractured, splitting into a complex, multi-layered harmony. It was clumsy, discordant at first, a child banging on a keyboard. The hunter drew closer still. The walkway of light beneath Elara's and Riker's feet began to tremble. "It's not working." "Kalen," Riker yelled, as the very fabric of the space around them started to shimmer, like air over hot pavement. "Hold on." Kalen's voice was a raw scream of effort. "Almost there. I need to balance the tertiary harmonics." There, on the map, the shuttle's thread suddenly snapped into focus. The discordant noise resolved into a perfect, complex chord, an exact duplicate of the Athelian fleet's signature. It was a perfect piece of mimicry, a flawless disguise. The hunter, now almost upon them, slowed. It seemed to hesitate. It circled the new, complex thread, as if sniffing at a creature that had suddenly and impossibly changed its scent. The pressure on the walkway eased. The rising hum of the orrery subsided. Elara held her breath, watching the silent, deadly dance on the map. The dark void drifted around the shuttle's icon one more time. Then, seemingly losing interest, it turned and began to glide back toward the Athelian cluster in search of simpler, easier prey. A collective, Ragged sigh of relief went through the comm channel. It worked, Riker breathed, lowering his rifle slightly. Holy hell, it worked. We're not done, Ilara said, her eyes still on the map. She watched the hunter resume its patrol. She watched the complex, camouflaged threads of the Athelian fleet. She had the key. She understood the jungle, and now she was no longer just the prey. Kalen, she said, her voice like ice. You've learned how to mimic the Athelian song. Now, I want you to learn how to sing a different one. Find me a frequency, a simple, loud, monotone, and I want you to project it from our main comms array, not at the hunters, at the Athelian fleet. A long silence followed from the shuttle. Then, Kalen's voice, quiet and filled with a chilling comprehension. Director, you want me to ring the dinner bell for them? Exactly, Ilara replied, a cold, hard smile touching her lips for the first time since Haven. The Athelians wanted to bring harmony to the universe. It's time they faced the silence. The order hung in the comms channel, stark and terrifying. Ring the dinner bell for the Athelian fleet. It was a declaration of war not just against an enemy, but against the established physics of the universe. It was a plan to turn the Athelians' greatest advantage, their mastery of fold space, into a fatal vulnerability, to sick the unknowable horrors of the void upon them. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the shuttle's life support. Riker stared at Ilara, his expression unreadable, a mixture of shock and a dawning, terrible respect. He had seen commanders who were brave, commanders who were brilliant, but he had never seen one who was willing to weaponize damnation itself. Kalen was the first to speak, his voice strained, crackling with a mixture of scientific horror and exhilaration. Director, projecting a monotone signal of that magnitude, with that specific prey frequency, it won't just alert the hunters in our immediate vicinity. It will be a beacon across this entire sector's fold space network. Every one of those things will hear it. And they'll come. All of them. That's the point. Kalen, Ilara said, her gaze still fixed on the shimmering map inside her helmet. She was watching the Athelian fleet, a cluster of silver threads, moving with arrogant, patient precision. They've spent decades hiding in plain sight, using a disguise to move with impunity while they pruned anyone who couldn't match their song. We're going to tear that disguise away and show the jungle's true predators where their largest, most convenient meal is located. But the projection, Kalen protested, the engineer in him wrestling with the sheer, beautiful madness of the concept. I'd have to use the Nomad's main communications array. Synchronized with the fold drive's resonance chamber, I'd be turning the entire ship into a giant tuning fork, broadcasting a signal that screams, "Eat me." The hunters will come for us, too. They will, Ilara agreed calmly, which is why we won't be there when they arrive. Anya. She switched to the ship's channel. What is the Nomad's current status? Anya's voice came back, tight with stress, but professional. Drive core is stable, but offline. Main power is at 30%. The crew has managed to patch the most critical hull breaches. We are crippled, Director, but we are holding. I need the drive back online, Ilara commanded. We have a new mission profile. As soon as the Wren docks, Kalen will begin work on what we're calling the resonance projector. He'll need priority access to all engineering and communication systems. Our goal is to create a remote drone, a decoy, that can broadcast the prey signal. We jump in, deploy the drone, and jump out before the hunters arrive. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. They would have to return to the edge of the Athelian-controlled space, a region they had barely escaped with their lives. Deploy a piece of experimental, unproven technology, and pray they could escape the cosmic feeding frenzy they were about to trigger. Director, Anya's voice was hesitant. The crew, after what happened, morale is shattered. Ordering them back into that hornet's nest. Give me a ship-wide channel, Alara said. A moment later, a soft chime indicated the channel was open. Alara drew a steadying breath. She was not a woman given to speeches. Her leadership was built on competence and cold, hard results. But she knew this moment required more. She needed to give them a reason to follow her back into hell. "This is Director Vance," she began, her voice echoing through the damaged corridors and cramped crew quarters of the Nomad. 2 days ago, we lost 47 of our own. We lost the Swift and the Resolve. We followed a signal of hope and found only a trap. I take full responsibility for that. I led you into the darkness, and I will not ask you to forget the price we paid." She paused, letting the weight of the admission settle. "But in that darkness, we found a truth. Our enemy is not invincible. They are not gods. They are hiding from a power they cannot control, a power they have learned to exploit. They use it to hunt us, to erase us from existence with a contemptuous ease. The Athelians speak of universal harmony, but they practice the cold, quiet murder of civilizations. Today, we have found their secret. We have found their fear. We now possess the means to turn that fear into a weapon. The plan is simple. We are going to show the true predators of the void where to find them. We are going to take the silence they treasure so much and fill it with the screams of their own dying fleets." Her voice hardened, losing its somber tone and taking on an edge of tempered steel. "This will not be a battle for territory. This is not for resources. This is for haven. It's for Proxima C. It's for Earth. It's for every human world that was silenced. I'm not asking you to fight for survival anymore. I'm asking you to fight for vengeance. Kalen is making the weapon. The Nomad will be the hand that wields it. We will not be the discordant note. We will be the thunder that breaks the silence." Vance out. A profound quiet followed her transmission. Then, slowly, a new sound began to filter through the comm from the bridge. It was a low murmur at first, then a rising swell of voices, shouts of affirmation echoing from the engineering deck, the medbay, the mess hall. It was a raw, cathartic sound, the sound of a crew that had been broken by fear, finding a new, harder foundation in fury. Anya's voice came back, thick with emotion. "The crew is with you, Director. All hands. We'll be ready." Alara closed the channel, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. She had given them a cause, a target for their pain. She had forged their grief into a weapon, but she knew the cost. She was asking them to embrace the same cold, consuming rage that had driven her since Haven, and she wasn't sure if that was a path anyone, herself included, could ever truly come back from. The journey back to the Nomad was a tense, silent affair. Kalen immediately sequestered himself in the shuttle's small engineering bay, sketching frantic equations onto a data slate. Alara and Riker stood watch at the cockpit viewport, observing the silent, majestic orrery as they pulled away. It remained as it was, a silent monument to a power beyond their ken. its central eye no longer glowing crimson. It had shown them the truth, and now it was dormant once more. The real work began once they docked. The Nomad became a hive of frantic activity. Under Kalen's obsessive direction, engineering teams began cannibalizing a long-range comms drone, retrofitting it with components stripped from the ship's own systems. They jury-rigged a power core from a spare shuttle reactor and linked it to the drone's broadcast antenna, which Kalen had modified into a resonance emitter. He called his creation the Siren. "It's a crude instrument," he explained to Alara, standing before the half-finished device in the main cargo bay. The Siren was an ugly, skeletal thing, a mess of exposed wiring and welded plates. It won't be able to produce the complex harmonies of the Athelian camouflage. All it can do is scream one pure, agonizingly simple note, but it will be the loudest, most obnoxious scream in the galaxy. And once we activate it, its power core will burn out in less than 10 minutes. We have one shot at this. "One shot is all we need," Ilara said. 3 days later, it was ready. The Nomad, scarred and battered, limped toward the edge of the nebula. The fold drive was online, but Kalen had warned that it was unstable. They could make 2 jumps, max. 1 to get into position, and 1 to get out. There would be no margin for error. On the bridge, the mood was electric. Every crew member was at their station, their faces set with a grim resolve. "We are approaching the jump point," Anya reported, her voice steady. "Coordinates are locked on the Kestrel Expanse, a known Athelian fleet staging area." Ilara stood at the center of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. "Launch the Siren," she commanded. In the cargo bay, the drone was loaded into a launch tube. Moments later, it shot out into the void, a tiny speck against the swirling colors of the nebula. "Siren is away," the tactical officer confirmed. "It's running silent on a pre-programmed course for the heart of the staging area." Ilara nodded. "Kalen, begin the fold sequence. Take us in." The universe outside the viewport twisted and dissolved into the chaotic tunnel of fold space. This time, there was no attack. They were cloaked in their stolen Athelian song, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The transit was blessedly short. They emerged into the stark, black space of the Kestrel Expanse. On the tactical display, the system was lit up with contacts. At least 50 Athelian ships drifted in silent, perfect formations. It was a reserve fleet, poised to strike at a dozen different targets. They were blind to the Nomad, which floated at the edge of their sensor range, a ghost in their own frequency. "The Siren is approaching the target coordinates," Anya reported, her voice hushed. "It's in the middle of their formation." Ilara's gaze was fixed on the tactical plot, her expression as cold and hard as the void outside. "Kalen," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "sing for them." From his station, Kalen typed a single command. "Signal activated." He confirmed, his voice tight. Across the system, the Siren came to life. It began to broadcast its terrible, simple song. On the Nomad's tactical display, it appeared as a single, blindingly bright point of light. To the Athelians, it must have been like a silent, invisible flashbulb going off in a darkened room. Their perfect formations instantly broke, the silver icons on the display scattered in panic. They knew what that signal meant. But it was too late. On the orrery's map, a beacon had just been lit, and the hunters were stirring. "We have a problem," Anya said suddenly, her voice sharp with alarm. She pointed to a section of the display. "One of their ships. It's not fleeing. It's coming right for us. It's a Proctor-class vessel. A command ship. It must have detected the origin point of the broadcast command." On the main viewer, a single Athelian cruiser, its hull of smooth, white stone gleaming, detached from the panicked swarm and began to accelerate toward them. It was ignoring the greater threat, its attention focused solely on the source of its sudden terror. "It knows we're here," Riker said from the back of the bridge. "Our camouflage is good, but not perfect up close." "We don't have time to engage it," Alara stated, her mind racing. "We need to jump. Now. But if it follows us..." The implication was clear. If the Athelian ship followed them through the fold, it would lead the hunters right back to the Nomad. They would have set a trap for their enemy, only to be caught in it themselves. Alarms began to blare. The Athelian ship was firing. Lances of pure kinetic energy, silent and invisible, slammed into the space where the Nomad had been a moment before. Ilara's pilot was already executing evasive maneuvers. "The siren is working," the sensor chief yelled, his voice a mixture of terror and triumph. "I'm detecting massive, localized gravimetric distortions forming all around the Athelian fleet. The hunters. My God, they're here." On the tactical plot, the space around the Athelian icons began to shimmer and distort. Dark voids. The hunters from the orrery were materializing from nowhere, their very presence collapsing the space around the fleeing ships. Athelian cruisers vanished from the screen, not in explosions, but simply ceasing to be. It was a silent, terrifying massacre, but the command ship was still coming, ignoring the slaughter of its fleet, its focus absolute. It was closing the distance, its weapons firing with cold, methodical precision. "We can't shake it," the pilot yelled as the ship shuddered from a near miss. "It's locking us into a gravity well. We can't jump." They were trapped. The hunters were converging on the screaming siren, but one of their intended victims was refusing to die and was about to take them with it. Alara stared at the approaching ship, at the silent, unfolding apocalypse happening across the system. She had sprung her trap. She had her vengeance, and the price was going to be everything. The universe outside the Nomad had become a canvas of silent, elegant destruction across the kestrel expanse. The Athelian fleet was being unwritten from existence. Ships of stone and light winked out, their perfect formations dissolving into pockets of warped space-time as the hunters descended. It was a victory beyond Ilara's wildest imaginings, a slaughterhouse of the gods, and they were about to be caught in the abattoir's machinery. The Proctor-class command ship ignored the carnage engulfing its brethren. A predator focused on a single, defiant target. Its kinetic lances were precise, relentless, forcing the Nomad's pilot into a desperate, weaving dance of avoidance. Each near miss sent a violent shudder through the ship's already tortured frame. Gravity well at 90%. The pilot screamed, his knuckles white on the controls. "She's got us locked down. We can't build enough velocity to break free for a jump." On the tactical display, the white icon of the Athelian ship was a dagger pointed at their heart. On the wider sensor feed, the dark, swirling anomalies of the hunters were beginning to drift away from the decimated fleet. their attention drawn to the remaining pockets of energy in the system, the dying siren, and the frantic, chaotic struggle between the Nomad and the Proctor. "They're noticing us," Anya said, her voice grim. "The hunters. They're starting to move in our direction." They were caught in a fatal triangle. The Proctor would kill them. Or the hunters would, and the only difference was the method of their dissolution. Ilara stared at the screen, her mind a vortex of tactical realities. They couldn't fight. They couldn't run. The logic was inescapable. This was the end of the line. For a fleeting moment, the memory of Haven surfaced the silent, shattering sky. This was the same feeling, the cold, intellectual certainty of absolute defeat. But she was not the same woman. She had been forged in the fire of that memory, and she would not be consumed by it. A new thought, wild and impossible, sparked in the cold calculus of her mind. "Kaylin," she said, her voice cutting through the rising panic on the bridge with chilling authority. "The siren. You built it to scream a single note, a signal of prey." "It's working," he replied, his voice a half-mad shriek of triumph and terror. "It's working better than I ever dreamed." "Turn it off," Ilara commanded. The bridge fell silent, save for the shriek of alarms. Kaylin stared at her from his console, his face a mask of utter confusion. "Turn it, Director. That's the only thing keeping the majority of them focused over there. If I turn it off, they'll all come for us." "The siren is a decoy," Ilara said, her eyes burning with an intense, terrifying clarity. "And we are no longer hiding. You learned to mimic the Athelian song. You learned to sing the praise song. Now, I want you to broadcast a new one. I want you to broadcast us." Kaylin's jaw worked silently. "Broadcast us? What does that even mean?" "It means you stop projecting a simple, clean frequency," Ilara explained, her words coming faster as the idea took its final, terrible shape. "You take every chaotic energy signature this ship is producing, the fluctuating power levels of our dying drive, the biosignatures of 100 terrified humans, the frantic chatter on our internal comms, the very resonance of our damaged hull, and you amplify it. You turn it into a broadcast. The Athelians called our species a discordant note. I want you to turn the Nomad into a symphony of that discord. I want you to show the hunters in this void what humanity really sounds like." The sheer, beautiful insanity of the command settled over Kaylin. It was a rejection of every principle they had just learned. Instead of hiding in a complex chord or screaming a simple note, she was proposing they broadcast pure, unadulterated chaos. It was a leap of faith into a new, untested physics, a gamble on the very nature of their species. He looked at the readings, at the closing Proctor, at the approaching hunters. Their current path led to certain death. This new path, it led into the complete unknown. A slow, manic grin spread across his face. It would require a direct conduit link between the environmental systems, the comms array, and the Fold Drive's resonance chamber, he said, his fingers already flying across his console. The power feedback would be catastrophic. It would fuse the entire system, and we would never be able to project a signal again, and we would certainly never be able to make another Fold jump. This is a one-way street. Director, the only way out is through. Kaylin, Ilara said softly. Do it. A new alarm blared, a proximity alert, a cold, chiming voice, like glass striking glass, suddenly filled the bridge, broadcast on an open channel from the Proctorship. It was the same type of voice as the envoy on Haven. Discordant anomaly. It resonated, devoid of any emotion. Your chaotic pattern is an offense to the structure of existence. You have consorted with the Great Silence, but you do not understand it. You cannot wield it. You can only be consumed. We are the cure. The universe requires harmony. As it spoke, the memory of Liam and Maya laughing in the garden flashed behind Alara's eyes, sharper and more painful than ever. The proctor's words were the same sterile, arrogant judgment that had condemned her world to dust. But the rage that followed was different now. It was not the hot, consuming fire of vengeance, but a cold, clear, diamond-hard defiance. "Mr. Kalen," she said, her voice steady as stone. "Let's show them what a discordant note can really do." "Broadcasting on your mark. Director," Kalen replied, his hand hovering over a glowing activation rune on his screen. The proctorship was almost upon them, its weapon ports glowing with the stored energy of a final, fatal blow. The forward hunters were close enough now that their presence was a visible distortion in the starfield, patches of a darkness so profound it felt like holes in reality. Ilara watched the Athelian ship fill the main viewport. She saw her own reflection in the glass, a pale, determined ghost. She thought of her daughter chasing a drone through flowers. She thought of the proctor's words, "The universe requires harmony," and she smiled. A thin, sharp, and utterly human expression. "Mark," she said. Kalen slammed his hand down. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the Nomad screamed. It was not a sound that could be heard with the ears, but a wave of pure information, a blast of raw, chaotic data that erupted from the ship in all directions. It was the sound of 100 panicked heartbeats, the fractal complexity of human language, the random fluctuations of a dying machine, the dissonant chord of a species that lived and fought and loved and hated all at once. It was a broadcast of pure, unfiltered life in the infinite tapestry of the orrery. A new thread had appeared. It was not a simple line, nor a complex, orderly chord. It was a roaring, tangled, unpredictable snarl of light, a burst of cosmic static. The hunters, which had been closing in, stopped. Their advance faltered. They seemed to circle this new phenomenon, not with predatory hunger, but with something akin to confusion. This new sound did not fit their paradigm. It was not the simple signature of prey. It was too complex, too random, too alive. It was not food. As the hunters hesitated, the Athelian proctorship fired. Its final, perfect lance of kinetic energy shot toward the Nomad. But its target was no longer the sole focus of the void. The proctor, in its cold, logical perfection, in its unwavering, monotone purpose, was now the simplest, most recognizable signal in the immediate vicinity. Its harmony, next to the Nomad's roaring chaos, was now the clearest prey signature. The hunters turned. Before the kinetic lance could even cross the distance, 3 of the dark voids converged on the proctorship. It did not explode. It simply came apart. The smooth, white hull peeled open as if it were made of paper, the space it occupied collapsing in on itself. The ship and the cold, harmonious voice within it was consumed by the great silence it had revered and foolishly tried to wield. It was erased. The kinetic lance, its guidance system gone, shot harmlessly past the Nomad and vanished into the void. On the bridge, the crew stared in stunned, breathless silence. The immediate threat was gone. The hunters, seemingly having lost interest in the incomprehensible noise the Nomad was making, began to drift away, returning to their patient, eternal patrol. Status of the drive. Kalen, Alara said, her voice quiet in the sudden stillness. Kalen slumped in his chair, his face slick with sweat, looking utterly spent, fused. The resonance chamber is a lump of slag. The comms array is fried. We are adrift, Director, but we are alive. Alara looked at the tactical display. The Kestrel expanse was a graveyard. The Athelian fleet was gone. They had won. She walked to the viewport, looking out at the distant, swirling colors of the nebula that had been their prison and their salvation. They were alone, crippled, light years from home. But they had done the impossible. They had faced an enemy that saw them as a cosmic mistake, and they had proven that their flaw was their greatest strength. Weeks later, a flicker of light on a long-range sensor resolved into a ship, then another, and another. It was a search party from the Kepler remnant, led by General Corbin himself aboard his flagship. They had picked up the faint, unique energy signature of the Nomad's dying reactor. When Corbin's face appeared on the holotable, the usual scowl was gone, replaced by an expression of stunned awe. His patrols had found the wreckage in the Kestrel expanse, the silent, shattered remains of an entire Athelian fleet, destroyed by forces unknown. Director Vance, he said, his voice rough with an emotion she had never heard from him before. Report. Alara stood tall. The Athelian fleet has been harmonized. General, Operation Chimera is complete. Months turned into a year. The Nomad, towed back to the remnant, was slowly and painstakingly repaired. It became a legend, the ghost ship that had sung a song of madness and survived. The Athelians, their fleets shattered and their secret weapon turned against them, had retreated. The war was not over, but the great silence had been broken. Humanity had a future. Alara Vance remained in command of the Nomad. She stood on its bridge, looking out at the stars, but she saw them differently now. They were not just a graveyard of suns, but a sea of infinite possibilities. She brought up the memory of Haven one last time. Liam and Maya were still there, laughing in the garden under an azure sky. The pain was still there, a sharp, clean ache that would never truly fade. But the consuming fire of her rage was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound stillness. She was no longer just an instrument of vengeance. She was a guardian of the beautiful, terrible, chaotic song of her species. With a soft chime, she let the memory fade, choosing the present over the past. The silence on the bridge was no longer the sound of failure. It was the quiet breath before the next verse, and humanity, in all its discordant glory, was finally ready to sing.